want to thank Val for being our tech coordinator today on our Skype call here. We're doing direct from the UK this morning, so this is good. What time is it there?
It's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
Just about ready to go to the pub.
This is Ilicco Elia. He's the global head of mobile for Reuters, consumer media at Thomson Reuters, and he's responsible for strategy, promotion, and commercialization of Reuters' portfolio of mobile websites, applications, and alerts. And in that role, he does a lot of work with developing products and news products and working closely with journalists and helping journalists use new technology. He's worked closely with Reuters' partnership with Nokia to roll out their smartphone products to their reporting staff. And I'm going to let him take it away. And I may have to relay questions, but we've had a lot of questions from the audience in their first session, so expect that, I guess, okay? And we welcome you to our mobile migration workshop in Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, I do hope the weather over there is much better than it is here. I couldn't get to work today. But anyway, that's probably a good thing. It means I get a much faster broadband connection from my home than I do from at work. Just a little bit of, just a couple of questions from me first. About how many people are in the room?
About 30.
Okay, so hello everyone. And so I look after our mobile and basically all of our services and products that are not in a desktop browser at Reuters. So that's our external electronic signage, our mobile sites and tablet applications and services, as well as SMS services and alerts. And please interrupt me whenever you want to ask questions, or if there's anything you don't agree with is a good one, and also anything you don't understand. I know the accent's a little bit weird. So just to give you a little example of the sort of breadth of the things that I look after, we have mobile sites in the UK, Italy, Germany, France, Spain, the US, Canada, China, Japan, and South America. All of that gets managed out of the UK, apart from our development resources, which are based out in New York. And we also have a whole load of mobile applications as well, mainly based around our News Pro application, which is a direct-to-consumer news, basically news and financial information application. We also major in pictorial news gathering, as well as video on mobile as well. And what we try to work out, or try to make sure, is that actually our mobile applications weren't dumbed down because they were mobile. We do try and release as much content as we possibly can across all three platforms: tablet, mobile, and desktop. The other side of my role is actually trying to work with our journalists and our photographers and videographers in using mobile technology in their workflow, trying to make them or see how we can better use mobile technology to enable them to either report faster or report more, or just create more multimedia content. The sort of things that we see these days, like live blogging and mobile phone videos being uploaded directly to the BBC and CNN. We've been doing that for a long time now, in fact, and have really tried to make mobile assets just a normal part of our workflow in getting content into our systems and out to our clients, both on the agency side and direct to end consumers through our mobile sites and desktop sites. Now, the title of this is the mobile migration, which I presume means trying to give advice or talking through how you move from a purely desktop environment to also use mobile as as a delivery mechanism as well as a content creation mechanism. The idea that we had in terms of content creation was actually because we're not going to be able to compete with people like CNN or the BBC for pure reach in terms of a consumer audience. Our content creation sort of philosophy on mobile has been much more around expert creation or peer creation of content and expert interviews, as opposed to citizen journalism, which is a sort of another way of putting it. So, for example, at Davos this year, we gave mobile phones and small flip cameras to some of the delegates and said to them, you go and interview people that you find interesting and bring that video content back to us, and we will publish it sort of on your behalf, as it were. That's different to the in theory to the way that citizen journalism happened in places like Libya and Japan with the floods and the tsunamis. It's much more about the high quality content that's coming from knowledgeable people, as opposed to eyewitnesses, which is ever so slightly different in a theory. Now, getting that content and publishing it on mobile sites and mobile applications causes no end of headache, I think is the easy way of putting it. We publish a newspaper application across pretty much every platform there is, all the way from Palm and Windows 7 to Windows 6.5 and obviously iPhone, iPad, Android and Blackberry. And the interesting part of my day is actually trying to work out which ones of those platforms are worth the effort for a start, and which ones of those platforms are easy to develop for, and how we can effectively develop for each platform without it costing or without us needing to have a complete set of developers, QA people, content providers for each platform specifically. The other side that is causing a couple of issues at the moment is the proliferation of mobile application stores. The idea that you can buy a Samsung Android device on the Verizon network in the US actually means that you can have a Samsung store, the marketplace, a Verizon store, an Amazon store, there's a Verizon business store, and all of the other places where you can actually purchase applications from externally to a particular store as well on that particular device. That in itself causes issues with support, issues with fragmentation of having to develop and distribute applications across each one of those stores. But also there's an interesting side from the consumer's point of view, where if you were to, for example, purchase an application from Thomson Reuters via the Samsung store on your Android device, there's confusion actually from the consumer's point of view as to if you did upgrade that, if you were to upgrade your phone to say an HTC as your next device, could you still use the applications that you bought within the Samsung store on your HTC device? Considering the fact that they are all Android devices, that fragmentation of the App Store marketplace in itself is going to need a hell of a lot of education of the people that are buying applications going forwards. It doesn't, Apple don't have that issue, and because they are very, very prescriptive of their practices and who cannot deliver or deliver applications, and they have to be done through their store specifically. So at Reuters, mobile is not considered a separate entity whatsoever. I used to be in charge of the emerging media group, but actually until my boss told me we had emerged and we're now just a group within the company. So mobile, we really do believe, is at the core of all of our different digital platforms. And that's all the way from using a single database to store our information, through to a single platform on which to deliver it, and a single ad sales unit that sells advertising across all of the platforms as far as possible. Interestingly, we also look to try and integrate our mobile applications with our external signage wherever possible. And we ran a great campaign in the US on our Times Square signage for Nike and the Nike ID, where you can design your own sneaker. I'm not sure I like saying that word. And up on the big, up on Times Square's largest digital screen, you can see the actual shoe that you had designed on your mobile phone using some software that you download via Bluetooth, standing outside the building. Now I can imagine a day when, as you walk away from that scene or from that situation, we could send you an SMS or send you an alert somehow to enable you to get a money off coupon to buy that shoe that you just designed in front of the tourist on Times Square. And I can see a time where you can use your mobile phone to pay for that shoe. But also, I can see a time when by the time you get to the shop, that your actual shoe will be ready for you to be picked up, as opposed to the 6 or 8 week delay that we currently have in making a shoe. Now, the one biggest issue I think that we've definitely seen over the last year or so is actually I like to sort of define it as a comment of saying, basically, beware of the finger, because these days, virtually all of our applications need to be designed with a sort of prod mentality, where users are simply prodding the screen, touching and swiping and pinching and zooming, but it's using fingers, which are much less precise digit than a mouse was previously. Even on the smaller and older Nokia devices, you would still use basically a joystick and a cursor around the screen to navigate, which made the design of those sites and design of those applications that we built much more akin to the design of applications on a desktop. Yes, obviously there's a much smaller screen real estate, but the fact that you now have to have an area of approximately 40 pixels by 40 pixels square in order to safely know that a user would press that particular area of the screen is definitely a challenging concept in terms of design going forwards, and definitely different, very different to the way that the products have been designed previously. The next sort of really interesting thing that we're seeing a lot of gains in recently is in the way that you can now use analytics or gather analytics on a mobile platform. There are very, very few companies still globally that can give you the analytics you need to be able to correctly or well design your applications and your services for end users. Getting simple analytics like unique users from a mobile site or application, or from a mobile site specifically, it used to be very, very difficult. But now we're starting to see a couple of companies have the ability to do that. And I'm not talking about simply using cookies on a mobile device and the fact that the new WebKit browsers actually are pretty good browsers, to be honest. We're talking all the way back to low-end Series 40 Nokia devices, Java devices, Blackberry specifically being a real pain. But now you can actually correctly identify individual or unique users as opposed to the individual user. And that then gets you a lot more information that is very useful when selling advertising and understanding how people look around your site. I remember a time when, especially in the UK, I basically thought we had 5 users on our mobile website: Vodafone, T-Mobile, Orange, O2, and 3. Those were the 5 users. They used our site very heavily, but that was about as far as our analytics would allow us to go. Are we all keeping up? All good?
Yes.
Cool. The other interesting question that we've had recently is the use of in-house or external development, and whether we should try and build everything ourselves, or try and use platforms, or use sort of small third-party development houses to help us get into a marketplace, or create an application for a particular platform. And that decision really comes down to how important it is for the applications or the sites that you're building to be integrated with your specific database, and how close you would like it to be to the content that you're providing on your desktop sites, for example, or on your professional applications. So, for example, we have a Reuters Galleries application for Blackberry, which uses simple RSS feeds of pictures to populate galleries that are downloaded on the fly to a Blackberry device. That doesn't, at the moment, need to be closely integrated to our login platform or our news delivery platform, and therefore could be built and was built by an external vendor specifically to solve a particular need. Whereas the mobile sites that we have across the world, we do need to have much more of a closer relationship with our desktop sites, and things like login and portfolio management, being able to go across, and alerts as well, being able to go across those platforms. And that meant that we need to build up our internal development team to be able to handle those types of queries from different devices.
Do you think you're in your sort of global markets that you'll continue trying to support every platform in that's out there?
Yeah, it's a good question. In the US, BlackBerry at the moment by far outweighs all of our other devices put together, in fact. So over 50%, I think it's about 60% of our users are BlackBerry based, and not a new BlackBerry either. It's the 8800 series, so not particularly nice, not particularly good looking sites, but the majority of our users are based on those types of BlackBerries. That doesn't surprise me at all, but it does mean that we need to ensure that our websites as well as our applications support those types of devices. And then when you go across to places like India, it's massively a good 80% of our users are Nokia users. So we're going to need to support a massive variety of devices purely from a website point of view because of the global reach. But also the idea that actually our users are much more corporate, and at the moment that is still definitely a BlackBerry market. Does that make sense?
Yes, that would seem to pose some unique challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Our developers, it's very difficult to actually enthuse our developers and get them to create applications or mobile sites that are not going to look like the stunning sites you see on iPhone and Android. But the idea of getting information out to whoever wants it as quickly as possible, and making those sites as small a download file size as possible to enable them to be downloaded as quickly as possible, is definitely a challenge in itself. Absolutely, and that's not even going anywhere near the low resolution screens and being able to detect specific devices as well. So the interesting part that I see in the use of our websites as opposed to the use of our applications, is the big difference in number of minutes they're being used for. And we're seeing a sort of tenfold increase, or an order of magnitude increase, in the number of minutes that our iPad or iPhone application is used per month compared to the news on a mobile website, which really does sort of either means that people are spending longer with their application or using it more. The figures aren't sort of conclusive yet as to whether it's one or the other, but the number of minutes used is definitely an order of magnitude higher than the mobile sites themselves. The type of content as well, there's much more types of research or longer form content within being read on applications as opposed to websites. It seems as though people are dipping in and out of a website to find out, the score of a game or the headlines, as opposed to actually spending time reading an article in its full length, as you would do on an iPad application, for example. So the interesting part about the Reuters galleries for Blackberry application that we built was, once we built it and gave it to our photographers to use, we actually found them using it for work purposes, and it allowed them to keep up to date with the photos that are being delivered and placed out over the wire from whilst they're in a particular scenario or situation. So, for example, in the World Cup in South Africa, and I use that just because it's a sort of an example of where we would have 6 to 8 photographers around a stadium, maybe a couple of electronic or automated cameras behind the goals as well. And all of those photos would be delivered wirelessly to an editor sitting in the stands. That editor would choose the right photos or the best selection of photos, tag them on the fly using sort of shorthand keystrokes that we built in. So knowing E1 would be the England #1 goalkeeper, and therefore their name would be automatically inserted into the slug of the picture. He would then choose the best photos to go out on the wire, and that I would take a feed of those photos and push them straight to a Blackberry, or straight to the Blackberry Gallery's application. All of our photographers had the Blackberry Gallery application and were using it to see the types of images and the breadth of the images that were coming out of that stadium whilst they're taking their photos, so they know the different types of images they should look for, or potentially we've had too many crowd shots or not enough crowd shots, and it would allow them to sort of hone the images or the pictures that they take throughout the game. So that reversal of using what started out to be a consumer application and ending up being a workflow-oriented application really meant that it sort of really embedded mobile into our workflow as much as possible. If only the BlackBerry camera was a little bit better, then we'd be able to get rid of the $3,000 cameras we use as well. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
From the time the photographer takes a photo to the time it appears in the gallery, when you're trying to move it as fast as possible, how long is that?
The bottlenecks are all of the human parts that need to happen. So the tagging and the slug creation and the potential cropping of the image if needed by the editor. If we did none of that, then a photo coming out of a camera, Wi-Fi to the editor, straight into the feed and onto the application is under a minute. And I noticed that it was actually much quicker than I thought it would be when I was sitting in a pub watching an England game, and I saw the goal scorer on my BlackBerry a picture of the goal scorer on my BlackBerry literally as what I thought was the moment he was scoring the goal on the TV, because of the delays that the TVs were have inherently in them.
I've got
So,
a, I've got one. I've got a. Hang on just for a second. I got a question.
Oh, hi, this is Corey from the Washington Post. I just wanted to know if you created this kind of workflow, particularly for World Cup, or if it was something that has kind of been in the works, and then you were able to do this real use case there, and then how else have you implemented it?
Could you hear
yeah.
that? Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't specific for the World Cup. There were some instances of the process that are specific to the World Cup, like the tagging of the images and getting the shorthand and short tagging to enable us to get the pictures out quicker than we would otherwise be able to do. But it actually all started back about 2 or 3 years ago with the mobile journalism project that we completed with Nokia, where we were giving our journalists cameras or phones, sorry, and telling them to use them as cameras and as multimedia creation devices way back then. And we really sorted out the workflow that we would need to basically allow us to think of any of the assets that come in off a mobile phone or off a camera or in any, basically any type of asset. It's just treated as though it's a normal picture and not treated any differently. That the tagging was potentially specific for the World Cup, but we've used it since in things like the Cricket World Cup. We've used it, the live delivery of images to the BlackBerry application. We use that virtually all the time now. I think we've currently got about 5 or 6 feeds that are live feeds of pictures, and it doesn't really matter what the event is. It still benefits from a live feed. The use of the application by our photographers was just a sort of good by the way. It wasn't planned at all. To answer the question.
It does. Thank you very much.
So the other side of the coin is actually the use of our SMS Alerts service and the other alert service that we use to alert people when there is new functionality, or not functionality, sorry, when there is new content on items or channels of news that they are interested in. And there's been a lot of debate around whether you should use SMS as an alert service or application alerting or simply alerts across the top of a mobile site. And what we've found is that different areas or different countries of the world and different scenarios actually call for different ways of alerting users. So for example, if on our desktop site we have a bar across the top of the site when we have breaking news and news that's happening right now that is that an editor has deemed as important. At the moment, that seems to be happening more often than not, which is probably not a good place to be. But that red bar that sits across the top of Reuters.com is exactly the same red bar that sits across the top of our mobile websites as well. The content that gets placed in the bar on the desktop site is literally exactly the same content as on mobile. So the way that we have enabled our editorial staff to write once and it be pushed as many different ways as possible is a key factor. If you then go to somewhere like Italy, we have a very successful SMS service in Italy where we send anywhere upwards of 3 to 6 SMSs a day to users who pay 30 cents a go to read those SMSs. And we have hundreds of thousands of subscribers to that service, specifically in Italy. We have the same service in the UK, but to be quite frank, very few users on that service. So the use of those services in different regions is very, very specific to a country or to what seems to be the way that this service has grown up over the last sort of 10 years or so.
What kind of content in Italy are they willing to pay for? Anything, or is it
Um,
specific?
It's very heavily skewed to a political alerts service. So it's not necessarily general news, but it's news of much more of a political nature, and business news as well. So those two types of sort of news alerts. We've also had a lot of success with like an end of day summary as well, especially like a market update. I believe that it's down to the fact that you know what you're getting. If you subscribe to an end of day summary, you'll get one SMS at the end of every working day, so you'll know it's going to cost you, £1.50 or €1.50 a week to keep up to date with that service, as opposed to it's up to us, a service where it's up to Reuters to determine whether an article is important enough to be sent out as an SMS. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do. When we sign a user up to an SMS service, for example, and this could hold true for any other type of alert service, but you need to set some type of idea as to how many alerts you would get over the course of, say, a day or a specific time period, and trying to work out early in the morning whether an article is worthy of an SMS alert, but also bearing in mind that it needs to be a timely alert. So you can't wait until 10 o'clock in the morning to say, actually, that business story from 8 o'clock in the morning was the most interesting one all day today. That's actually a very difficult sort of editorial process to have to go through to try and work out whether it's important enough to send, but also wait to see if there's a better one coming around the corner. It's not like a website where you just keep adding news onto the site. Now, the other interesting thing that we've done in mobile specifically is used it to help us with creating more sort of personal interviews with famous people. So what we found, and it was very interesting, I've spoken to a few sort of smaller blog where to get into the news space, and technology news is a good example, to get into the sort of technology news space, a small blog in the UK, for example, one that's close to my heart is mobileindustryreview.com. They actually went out and bought big, expensive video cameras and microphones because it gave them much more of the gravitas they needed to conduct the interviews when they're asking people for interviews. Having the fantastic name of Reuters behind you really does mean that when you ask someone for an interview, more often than not, that they'll give that in or allow you to interview them. The gravitas comes from the name as opposed to the sort of situation that you're being interviewed in. And it was really interesting that what we're doing is actually going down the scale and getting smaller and smaller cameras that allow our journalists to work more effectively and more in a more personal way. But the smaller bloggers or smaller blog sites are actually buying larger and larger cameras to make them seem more professional. to enable them to actually get the interviews that they potentially otherwise wouldn't have got. And we did that. The other side to that is actually when you interview someone with a mobile phone as your camera, the type of interview you get from someone is vastly different to an interview if you have a cameraman, sound man, and lighting engineer, and a person with a big fluffy microphone waiting in the sides as well to take an interview. You get a very, very different interview.
Is it a better interview?
Say again?
Is it a better interview?
It's a different interview. Some people can say you can catch people more off guard potentially, or you get statements that are much more informal. I think when you're much closer to the person with just a small camera, there isn't this big lens in between you. And there's still theories that need to be worked out as to whether you should look in the camera, whether you should look at the person taking or conducting the interview. And I think that amplifies itself when you're using a much smaller camera, because there is the sort of direction of pointing is exaggerated when you're using a bigger camera. Yeah, it's just a different interview. It depends what you want to get out of the person, what type of interview you want to get from that situation. And we did it in the UK just before the general election, where we had an opportunity to basically use Twitter and Facebook to garner questions for the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown, and at the same time we sat in the front row of our auditorium in the Reuters head office in London, with me with a mobile phone videoing the interview, as well as the professional cameras that were at the back of the auditorium, producing the feed for the BBC and Sky and our other partners in the UK. The interesting part to that was you using software like Bambuser or Quick allows you to actually get feedback immediately via your phone whilst you're taking the video itself. And that's a very interesting place to be, because if you're a sole reporter interviewing someone, you could actually get members of the audience or members of the public to ask you questions that you see through the phone's screen to relay to the person you're interviewing. That feedback mechanism and shortening the time between that feedback mechanism makes for a much more complicated interview for the interviewer, and it is actually very difficult to try and keep up with questions coming in, looking for responses, formulating a question in your head, asking it, listening to their response, seeing if there's any new comebacks from members of the public, and adding those into the next question. Don't underestimate how much work that is live.
What kind of standard kit are reporters and photojournalists using from Reuters?
Photographers are Canon based, so any of the Canon DSLRs, that sort of side of it. But mobile specifically, to be honest, it's whatever phone or equipment they currently have. What we're doing now is, as those contracts or those phones break, we're upgrading them to devices that are much more capable. So obviously the iPhone is a firm favorite with a lot of our journalists, but Nokia, we're finding, have a much better microphone, much better camera, and the battery life just is ridiculously good. It really depends on what they're doing. Blackberries are still used a lot for tweeting. It's the keyboard on a Blackberry is still one of the best there is, if not the best, on a mobile device. So something like the Blackberry Bold 9780 is one of the new devices that actually has a WebKit browser in it, as well as the excellent BlackBerry keyboard. Nokia have just released the C7, I think it might be called the Astound in the US, which has a camera on it that has an f-stop of 2.8, which is really quite incredible for such a small phone, or for a phone, in fact, let alone a small phone. And the camera, the battery life on that is absolutely fantastic as well. We're finding that Android phones currently don't potentially have as good camera as we would like them to have, but the availability of, or the ability for us to make software for the Android device a lot simpler than it is for any of the other devices at the moment, means that we can start creating upload and tagging software that we can use across on Android devices easier than we can do across other ones. But mostly it's all about the software that you use. So things like AudioBoo, which is an audio recording software in the based on a small company out of the UK. That's just audio with BOO at the end. They do a really good piece of software that just allows you to basically create podcast feeds really simply out of audio. And then we use as many free uploading software tools, packages as possible to enable us to ingest that content into our systems as quickly as possible, really. That's about it from me on mobile, I think.
Okay.
Any questions?
Let's see. Any questions?
Contact info, if you'd like to get in touch with them.
Oh, email or contact info for you or something?
Yeah, if anyone's on Twitter, it's just at Ilicco, ILICCO, or my email address is ilicco.elia@reuters.com. But I'll be honest, Twitter's probably quicker.
Give us the Twitter again.
What's your Twitter?
It's just my first name, ILICCO.
Yeah, okay.
This is Andre from the Washington Post. Just curious, how big is your mobile team? Developers, editors,
That's actually a really difficult question to answer, purely from virtually all of it is a shared resource with our desktop sites. So we work on a process where we basically ask for resource for a certain period of time and have a project that we want them to work on. So, for example, our iPhone application had a team of about 2 people on it, 2 developers, maybe 3 developers for some period of time as well. There's a shared resource of QA developers that we use to test all of the applications. And our mobile websites are all built by exactly the same team that builds the Reuters.com desktop site. So it's just basically seen as another browser type. So all of the work is split across all the people that work on our editorial, our development team on .com. When it comes to editorial, it's all shared. It's all very normal resource that we use for all of our other platforms. There's no specific mobile editor or journalists. We try and integrate it as much as possible and get everyone to do everything, basically.
What is the expectation for the formerly text-type journalists out in the field? Are they expected on a daily basis to be taking photos and shooting videos, or?
It's actually not expected. No, it's what we found is that we've given them the ability to produce content any which way they see fit, and it really is up to them to determine the best way to tell this story is in text or in pictures or in video or in a little bit of all 3 or just in text. A lot of our journalists are still, or in fact, the vast majority of our journalists are all still single asset type and working across a single asset type. But we use mobile technology for the times when they wanted to take a photo, but we just didn't have the resources to send out another a photographer or a film crew, or we don't have, or they don't have the time to be able to do that, or it would be better if there was a more personal interview, for example. So we don't expect multimedia content, but what we're finding is the more leeway we're giving our journalists to be able to produce that content, the more they're doing it, and the more they like to do it. When we first started this sort of project a few years ago, the instant reaction I got was, "You're expecting me to take photos and video and text? Obviously, my pay slip is going to be 3 times as large." And actually, when we obviously had to say no, but when we came back and said to them, just take the phone with you, use it if you want to, and almost without fail, every single journalist that I spoke to said, "I see what you're doing. It actually allows me to tell the story in a way that I feel benefits the story," and they don't always have the time to do everything, but it just gives them the freedom to be able to do that. And more often than not, more and more content comes in, and it allows us to, and allows us to tell stories in slightly different ways. The sort of trick or the issue that Reuters has is because we are also an agency as well as delivering content direct to consumers, the quality or the film quality and the picture quality that our agency clients expect far outweighs the quality that actually an end user or a consumer expects. So it's very difficult to actually create the content to please a newspaper or a news outlet with the equipment that's currently available. It's still lower quality than we would like it to be honest. Yes, you can now take 720p videos with an iPhone, but you still have to edit. They still struggle with lighting, and that's not the type of content we are sort of most proud of. It's the saying that the content, as long as there's some content, it's good content. So the content that came out of the 7/7 bombings, the tube bombings in London, the only video footage there was from mobile phones. Therefore, it's the best quality content you can get. But we strive to try and create content as high quality as possible, as does everyone. But I definitely see a difference between the quality that a newspaper wants from us and the quality that a consumer wants from us. And I think that's an issue that Reuters specifically has because of the way we're set up.
How do you address training with your spread out workforce?
We actually get our photographers to train our text journalists, and we get the text journalists to train the photographers, and the videographers to train both those other people as well, because they're the people actually in the field taking the photos and writing the news are the best people to know, we find, how you best take advantage of the situations. So we get all of journalists to sort of train each other, as it were, in their disciplines that they're working in.
Any more questions? Anybody else? Well, we appreciate your time today. We'll let you go to the pub.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's see. The red one. Whoops. He's off. Yeah, he's off. Okay. Oh, good.
Be back in here and ready to resume at 1 o'clock. This is a great opportunity for some good conversation and networking during lunch. Just gonna walk next